Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, the president of a ridiculous homeowner association dug up my land and bulldozed my driveway to expand the HOA neighborhood. I am not even a member of this organization. Here is what happened in the HOA. I don't know if this is true everywhere, but for me the HOA lines can get a little bit confusing because they take school zones into account, which coincidentally are also very abstract here. So I live in a block outside of the HOA area, and it seems like just a random cutoff with no rhyme or reason aside from the school zone changing there. Either way, I'm not part of that HOA and my area does not even have one. However, that never stopped the HOA president from thinking that my block was involved and trying to do crap pretending that it was. This HOA president would often come by and start trouble with people for not following the rules that we were under no obligation to follow. Everybody has gotten at least one fine from him, and it became almost a rite of passage for my block and the one next to mine, which he also did this kind of thing too. It went way too far one day when I came home and saw a mess. I work very generic hours, so I am home at about 7 PM every night. One day, I came back to see that my driveway had been destroyed and even fenced off, with the name of the construction company plastered right on it. The problem was that I was not doing any construction and I didn't approve of anything being done. I called, but of course it was too late and nobody was gonna answer me. I left an angry voicemail and made sure to call again in the morning. So what they told me was that they were hired to widen the road by the HOA president and had his permission to do so. I should have known that sleazeball had something to do with this mess. I know I shouldn't have misplaced my anger, but I yelled at the company telling them that they didn't have the right to do that and I wanted all construction to stop. They just told me that they had a contract and paperwork that said that the HOA president would okay the street renovation. That I had to go talk to him if I had a problem. So that's exactly what I did. You need to get those men off of my property now and repair my driveway entrance that you told them to dig up. HOA president, that road needs to be widened. It was well within my rights to do so. If you got a complaint, you should have brought it up beforehand at a meeting. You know that my block is not part of the HOA. You have no control there and knew that we wouldn't be at a meeting for an HOA that we are not members of. I want these people gone and you to fix my damn driveway. HOA president, don't you dare threaten me. If you try to obstruct the man working, I can have you thrown in jail faster than you can blink. He was not gonna budge, and instead of yelling myself purple in the face, I went and got a lawyer. I explained everything to him and he served the HOA president with a cease and desist order. It got no response and the work on the road continued. About 5 or 6 feet of my property was dug into in order to widen the road like he wanted. Essentially stealing my land on top of everything else. My lawyer drafted a lawsuit against the HOA and the man himself for destruction of property, trespassing, forgery and harassment. We had given him a chance to stop, but it was clear that he had no intention of doing things quietly. With the lawsuit officially drafted, he was sent a court order to have all construction paused until a judge settled things. For people wondering also why nobody else on my block was involved, he was having the street widened one house at a time and I was the first house on the street. So it started with me and I wanted to make sure it ended with me. One thing that the HOA kept refusing to hand over was the paperwork they gave the construction company that showed them my home was within the HOA. It took another court order for them to finally hand over those forms, which were full of lies. In court, we had a ton of evidence against them, and at one point my lawyer pulled out a map. Not an online one either, but an old school paper map that he had to unfold about 10 times. Not super relevant, but I don't know how many people actually remember using one of those things or knew that they were still being made. On it, he was pointing out where the school zones changed and that the HOA was not within my block. Me being a member or not was not even a factor, since I was outside of their boundaries and jurisdiction. We also showed that they ignored the cease and desist and continued to trespass and destroy my property. One thing I found funny was that it turned out that the HOA boundary was actually smaller than any of us thought it was. There were blocks, part of the HOA not actually within its area, that would now be free from it, but that's not the funny part. Guess whose home turns out to be not even within the HOA lines? Yep, the president himself. He was not within the HOA boundaries, so even if the lawsuit did not force him to step down, he could no longer be the president since he did not even live within it anymore. You have no idea how hard I was biting my lip to stop myself from laughing when he was told this in court. A judge was not happy about the construction either, telling the HOA president that roads are city property and he cannot mess around with one without the city's permission. And even then, they would be the ones to do the construction, not a third-party company. I was awarded a very large financial settlement in order to fix my property and make up for any other damage the HOA had caused me, with all construction ordered to be stopped as well. I fixed my land and had money to put away, but that was not the end of what happened regarding the HOA in the aftermath of the lawsuit. Like I said before, he was no longer able to stay president since he was outside of the boundaries, and they also had to give the money back they got from dues from every home outside of the HOA they had been taking from. The HOA president actually ended up being charged criminally for fraud related to the forgery and also embezzlement. There was apparently a nice kickback going on with that construction company they hired, and they threw him under the bus to not go to jail themselves. He did not get a super long sentence, but it was enough to make me feel like he got some well-deserved punishment. And I doubt that arrogant behavior was a good match for where he was going. And here, Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. Thank you so much, and the next one is titled "Today My Wife Met My Girlfriend." And this is kind of a wholesome / sad story. Anyway, I, 32 male, am a widow. My wife passed away from pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. She was forced to leave behind our 2 kids, R, 10 male, and H, 7 male. My wife was the absolute light of my life. We were high school sweethearts, went to the same college and got married after graduation. We were inseparable. Every day I fell more in love with her. It was like my heart was living outside my body. When she passed, the amount of pain I was in was indescribable. I prayed to go to sleep and not wake up just so I could see her one last time. I contemplated meeting her, but every time I was ready, my kids would look at me. They had her face, her personality, her DNA. I could not leave them. They were all I had left of her. It took years before I was able to function normally again. I even quit my job and lived off of savings and her life insurance for about a year. I was half the dad I used to be and only a fraction of my former self. 2 years after her passing, I decided enough was enough and I kicked myself into gear. I found a job in a different city, closer to my parents. I packed my kids up and I moved. Life was hard, but I kept chugging along and eventually I found some joy. A year after moving, I took a business trip to NY where I met my current girlfriend, Elle. While I acknowledged that there was chemistry, I told her that I was already married and she understood. However, a few months later I had to go back to NY, where we met up again. I let my guard down for the first time around her. Before I knew it, she was putting in a transfer from my home branch and moving to my city. I fell in love with her and asked her out a year ago next month. My kids adore her, and though she reminded them she will never take their mom's place, they lovingly call her Mama Elle. Today was the anniversary of my wife's passing, an extremely hard day for all of us. This morning I walked into the living room to find Elle and my kids waiting for me. The kids were dressed in their church clothes with goofy smiles on their faces and bouquets in hand. Apparently, Elle came up with the idea of a picnic at my wife's grave, an idea that the boys loved as they enjoy going to see their mom. While I was sleeping, they prepared food and flowers and then insisted on wearing their best clothes. I will admit that I cried at the sight of them. I don't know how I got this lucky twice in a row. I wanted my wife to meet this amazing woman, so I asked Elle to come along, and she did. The day that I dread every year turned out to be a humbling reminder of the reason why I stayed on this planet. To my lovely wife, you can never be replaced, but she is good to me and she takes care of your kids like you would. Thank you for sending her to me. Update to the story: I already had a profound appreciation for my girlfriend before I made that post, but the comments gave me an entirely new perspective. The night after I made that post, I took my girlfriend out to dinner, and I cannot explain it, but the light I was viewing her in was different. Everything she did that night gave me butterflies. She was showing me pictures that she took at the aquarium with my oldest, and I couldn't stop staring at her. In that moment, I came to the conclusion that I was gonna propose a lot sooner than I expected, and well, a few days later I went ring shopping with her mom, who was very excited, and we found the perfect ring. I then made a reservation at her favorite restaurant for last Friday and set the big day in motion. Long story short, I'm getting married again. As some of you said, promotions can wait, though after looking at her wedding ideas, I may need a promotion to financially recover. I'm excited to start this journey with her and my amazing kids. As I've said before, I'm so lucky. I hope you all find your own Lila. And thank you again. And yeah, ripe stars, please let me know in the comments whether you enjoy these more wholesome stories that maybe sometimes also bring you to tears. I think we don't read these stories that often, so I think it's a good bit of variety, because if we only do revenge and malicious compliance stories or whatever and entitled people, then it might get boring at some point. Either way, speaking of the devil, the next one is a malicious compliance story. A few years ago, I worked at a janky 2-bit company. The boss thought he was Billy Big Bollocks and God's gift simultaneously. He had such a big head, I'm surprised he could get through doorways. He used to drink beer at his desk for lunch and would often arrive at work late. He was also an insufferable muscle bro and walked around as if carrying rolls of carpet under each arm. A total prick. A few months into my time there, the company starts winning large orders, so he asks me to set up a small-scale production line to increase capacity and tells me the new hire will be situated there. I design it, set it up, test it all works, and I'm feeling a sense of pride with what I've accomplished. It worked like a dream. I was confident it would work really well for the new hire, and because I am an engineer by trade, everything was perfect and only I knew how to fix the broken stuff. Nobody else asked how it worked before making some very detrimental decisions. A while later there was an issue. He could not hire anyone willing to accept such a crappy wage and boring work, so Billy Big Bollocks had a bright idea to demote me and make me governor of my creation. No way, not for £9,000 less. I immediately started job hunting and I told him if that's your final offer, regard tomorrow as my final day. He then panics that he's committed the company to a £1 million order due for shipping in 3 days' time. During his alcohol-fueled panic, he tells me to write up highly detailed technical manuals and processes for my replacement. The production line included some precise handwork. Piss off, I cannot do that in 1 day. He also didn't specify what they should contain, and considering I had no help from him with this project, just complaints, I thought F it, so sure, he got his manuals. So I created Word documents with convincing titles like Technical Manual, Product Version 2, and How to do this precise task. Inside the documents were, for example, the surprised Pikachu face and Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys looking lost. Then below, just one line of text reading, "This manual contains all the information I could find or was given." The file sizes would also indicate a lot of text was contained within thanks to the images, and therefore at face value they looked legitimate. I saved them to my laptop in an equally legitimate looking folder that afternoon. Early the next morning I came to work to collect my belongings and do some handovers and found the laptop had vanished. I said my goodbyes to my colleagues and looked over to see him looking incensed with a beer in one hand, and he was so angry he did not even look up from his desk. A friend told me later that the company missed the production deadline despite him working 12-hour days to try to catch up. Apparently, the client was extremely pissed off. Moral of the story, don't screw over good people. And the next one is a petty revenge story. So my daughter, 17, asked me to post this here. I'm the dad who does as the women in my life tell me to do, which is how I ended up in a restaurant tonight with snobs. So the characters are my wife's coworker 1, and her husband, arrogant engineer 1, AE1, wife's coworker 2, and her husband, my CPA, and lastly AE2 and his wife. Each couple has 2 teenage children with us. We are at a Japanese steakhouse in America where the chefs cook in front of you. CW1 and AE1 invited all of us for their youngest daughter's birthday. Since their daughter is close with our daughter, so the parents are at one table and the teens at another. At the teen table, my daughters, 17 and 14, order sushi appetizers, mocktails and shrimps with scallops, and at our table the sake is flowing along with a few top-shelf drinks. My wife and I order our appetizers, drinks and dinners, and we are all paying for ourselves, and I see AE1 and AE2 seem to be in competition for who can spend the most. My CPA and I chuckle at them and stay out of the fray until AE2 hears my daughter order and says to her, "Careful now, your daddy is only an agricultural engineer." He doesn't make as much as us real engineers. For context, they are structural engineers with bachelor degrees, and I am an agricultural engineer with a PhD. I work for governments, private investors, and several agro corporations. I own my own consulting firm and I help build sustainable, reusable gardens. And this work allows me to travel to poorer countries and help them use what they have to start growing their own food. And apparently, these men thought that all I did was travel to impoverished places and teach people to dig in the dirt. They believed that I did all of this work for free and therefore made very little money. I'm not rich by any stretch, but I'm comfortable, we don't do extravagance, so we have savings and my wife works too. However, in 2023 I was awarded a handsome contract to design tower gardens in several states. It is a 7-figure contract over 3 years. Back to dinner, these guys ask me about the most ridiculous things like, is it good to grow onions and carrots in the same garden? And were laughing at me and my work until their wives told them to stop. I chalk it up to drunken arrogance and don't even bother to answer. My CPA was laughing so hard, he almost fell out of his chair. Apparently, he is AE1 CPA as well and knows the in and outs of both of our finances. AE1 taunts CPA to tell the table what he brought home last year after bonuses. CPA pulled up the fingers on the phone and tells us, it's about 1/3 of what I brought home in 2023. The CPA says, I have yours up, want me to share? I decline and he nods. Cue another round of taunts. I go to the restroom and find the waiter, I pay for the whole check and leave a generous tip on top of what they added for a big party. The waiter then thanks me in front of everyone for the tip and wishes everyone a good night. AE1 and AE2 stare at me for a moment, I smile, nod and tell CPA to tell them my income last year. After which I simply said, good night. Petty, absolutely. Gratifying, damn right. Either way, the next one is titled Grandma Revenge. This happened shortly after my grandmother moved in to live with me and my wife back in the early 2000s. My grandma was 89 at the time and could no longer drive, nor could she really write anymore, as this becomes relevant. We had a new landline put in and her landline phone number transferred to our address, and then one day she gets a call from Sears asking for a payment on a bill. She was a bit confused, so asked me to talk with the gentleman. He said her account was overdue. It was maybe a couple $100. I said she's received no bill, so has paid for nothing. They still had her old address. I told him okay, she is now living with me at my address. Send us the bill and we'll pay it. But nope, she has to come in and sign for an address change. I told him that's not gonna happen. She is 89, has mobility issues and can no longer sign her name to anything. Just send us a bill and we'll pay it. He would not budge. I said we are not gonna give a random over the phone any money without seeing a bill first. He was adamant that she had to come down and sign for the new address. It was petty revenge time. I told him fine, since she's not receiving a bill where she lives, then she owes them nothing, and until a bill arrives nothing will be paid. I told him at 89 she no longer gives a single damn about her credit score, and then I hung up. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say that was a brilliant way to handle the situation. Props to OP. The next one is titled Entitled Karen Gone Wrong. In my other post I explained that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic disorder affecting collagen. Among many other symptoms, it tends to make people look significantly younger than we are, so although I am 32 years old, I'm often mistaken for being a teenager. I dress in a very goth/punk style, which I'm sure probably adds to that. EDS often causes something that I cannot pronounce, which in simple terms means that being upright causes my heart rate to increase and my blood pressure to decrease, and the longer I'm standing, the worse it gets. If I'm standing for too long, I black out. I take medication that helps a lot, but I've had to stop taking it in order to get the virus vaccine. So my heart rate and blood pressure are completely uncontrolled at the moment. I had just arrived at my local shopping mall and got hit with a wave of dizziness, which is a surefire sign that I need to sit down before I fall down. There were 3 armchairs together for customers to use, and I sat down in one that had an abandoned empty shopping trolley next to it. The other 2 seats were occupied. I checked my numbers with the blood pressure monitor I carry with me, and they were pretty bad. BP of 105/68 and HR of 138 BPM. So I downed a few salt tablets and started scrolling through Reddit on my phone while I waited for things to improve. About 2 minutes later, the wild Karen appeared. ETA, Karen matched the stereotype in every conceivable way and looked to be about 45 to 50 years old. She marched over and barked at me to get out of her seat, claiming that she had clearly left her trolley next to it to reserve it. I told her the seats are there for everyone's use and people leave empty trolleys all over the shopping center, so that really didn't mean anything. During previous disputes about seating, I've sometimes told people that I couldn't move anyway because of my BP and HR condition, but it's never seemed to help the situation and is none of their business, so I don't need to mention it unless it's genuinely necessary. Karen, hand on hip, said she didn't ask for my idiot opinions and that when an adult tells me to jump, the only acceptable response is how high. I laughed and said, "Lady, I'm 32 years old and I don't answer to you." "Leave me the hell alone." She scoffed and said, "BS, don't you dare lie to me. Where the bloody hell are your parents?" I said that's none of her damn business and to stop harassing me because I'm not moving. As I was saying this, an older man vacated one of the other armchairs with a groan and an eye roll you and me both made, so I gestured to it and said, "There you go, Karen, there's a free seat right there. Are you happy now?" Karen folded her arms and with an entirely misplaced air of superiority said, "That's your seat, this one is mine, and you are going to move, young lady." Entirely done with her crap, I laughed and said simply, "No, going back to my phone." At this point, she pretty much lost it. She shouted, "Get your fat butt out of my damn chair!" and kicked the side of the seat hard enough to make me jump. As I responded with this stunt, "Wow, you're legitimately crazy, aren't you?" A member of the cleaning staff took notice and came over. She told Karen to calm down and asked me if I needed her to call security. I was gonna say yes please, but Karen jumped in and snapped, "Please do!" And then to me, "I would love to see security drag you out by your ear." He must have been nearby because the security guard quickly appeared and asked me what the problem was. Of course, Karen again jumped in and started telling him that this stroppy little brat had pushed her out of her seat and stolen it from her, and how it was clearly hers because that's my trolley right there. The security guard turned to me and asked if that was what happened, and I said, actually, like I told her, I'm 32 years old and she didn't show up until after I had sat down. She said she reserved the seat and I told her that's not how it works. She's been harassing me to get me to move and your colleague here saw her shouting and kicking the chair. Karen gasped and with an accusational pointed finger shouted, "You lying little piece of work!" But the cleaner backed me up. The security guard calmly told Karen that she cannot claim or reserve seats she's not using, and if she wanted to sit down, there were now 2 free seats right there. The third person had now also left. So Karen went red in the face and barked back, "Listen here, you will make her move or I'll be having words with your manager." The security guard sighed and told Karen that she had 2 options. Either she could walk away now, leave me alone and be allowed to get on with her day, or he would be escorting her out of the shopping mall. Surprisingly, Karen actually went with the third option. She scoffed and stammered and eventually opted to shout about how unbelievable this all was and that she was gonna go to center management's office to get the security guard and the cleaner fired right now. And then she stormed off, without her empty trolley of course. The security guard let her leave and unfortunately, I don't know what happened with her after that point. The security guard apologized to me for her behavior and I told him it was not his fault and that I was sorry he and the cleaner had to deal with crap like that too. He excused himself, saying he should probably follow her to make sure that she made it to the center manager's office without any further incidents along the way. And I chatted with the cleaner a bit about how ridiculous and childish people can be. She told me this was far from the worst or weirdest she had seen and that I would not believe the crap some people do, but did not elaborate. A plus side was that the whole situation had aided in increasing my blood pressure, so I sat there for about another 10 minutes to let my heart rate level out and was then able to get up and carry on with my day. If I see that security guard while I'm at the shops this afternoon, I'll be sure to ask him what happened and update this post. Unfortunately, there was never an update to this post, but still, I like how Karen was dealt with in this situation. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this.